Hello, welcome to another in our series of webinars from AFRY Management Consulting. This is the third in our series dealing with the current gas crisis following the and before the invasion of Ukraine. Once again, I'm joined by my colleague Lucy Field. Hi, Lucy.
Hello.
And Lucy is going to take us through some of the latest developments on this gas crisis. Perhaps if you could just skip on through the disclaimer. I'll do the housekeeping as per usual and leave the interesting stuff to you. So if you don't know me, I'm Matt Brown. I'm Vice President in the Management Consulting Division at AFRY, and we've got about 350 energy specialists, energy consultants, energy management consultants, call them what you will, in the company globally, and covering, of course, many different topics, many different areas, but the current situation with gas prices being one. Lucy, why don't you introduce yourself?
So for those of you who haven't already heard me say this, I've been working in the gas market and at AFRY as it is now and as it was before in Oxford for about 25 years. So I've seen a few things come and go.
Yeah, as previously mentioned, we've been working together for about 25 years as well, which has been a delight at all times.
Thank you, Matt.
So if you want to
move on now.
Yeah. So please ask questions throughout the webinar using the question panel. We will cover as many as we can. We have got quite a fair amount of material, I would say, to look at, so we'll see how we go. Slide pack and recording, as always, are available. They'll be emailed out, and the series of webinars are available by just do a Google on AFRY Energy Webinars. You'll see all of the webinars that we have conducted since we started these webinars back in March 2020. So all of them are available there. I'll also plug our podcast series, just recorded another episode today, which will be coming out within a few weeks, I hope. And that's called Fueling the Transition. So it's on all the normal platforms if you want to have a listen. With that, I will hand over to you, Lucy. I'll turn my camera off for the time being, and I might chip in as we go along. Thank you.
Okay, so today I'm going to run through some of the recent market developments, and I get updates from my colleagues every day because they're looking at different things. We have offices in different markets, so I'm regularly getting updates. I'm trying to keep it as up to date as possible. And then one of the things we've done recently is we've looked at the potential impact of a Russian interruption in slightly more detail than I did back in the beginning of March, when Russia had only just invaded Ukraine. None of the mitigations have been taken place. So I have a little bit of a longer look at what might happen if Russia were to cut off gas now. And then we're in the process of finalising our Q2 22 update of all our energy prices. The gas price, because so much comes off it, is done first. So we're most of the way there with updating our gas supply projections. So I'm going to talk about that and how AFRY's projections differ from the EU's stated aims and what those stated aims are, because they change quite often. This is the map, if you like, and the chart that we started with when back in 21, when supplies from Russia seemed to be going down a great deal in the last quarter, and this is updated to the end of April. And spot prices soared following the invasion of Ukraine, and actually slightly greater volumes of Russian contract gas were imported in February and March. But this has fallen back down in April, as you can see there, to very low levels, especially via Yamal, and less via Ukraine. And on this chart, I've added TurkStream in, because TurkStream is relevant because Bulgaria has been cut off via the direct Russia to Bulgaria route goes via Ukraine, but actually Russian gas goes in, more Russian gas now goes in via TurkStream that can make its way to Bulgaria, flowing the other way. So I wanted to put in, just for So a sense of a magnitude, if you like, how large the flows are that are coming in via Turk Stream now. This is a chart that we see often, just showing you the percentage dependence upon Russian gas of various EU member states. And what this doesn't, this is the actual percentage, so it doesn't show the magnitude of those dependents. But Germany is that's about 60%, 60 billion cubic meters, and Italy is about 40 billion cubic meters. And those are the two largest markets. So in absolute volume terms, it's Germany and Italy that are the most dependent on Russian gas, even though you have other countries like Hungary or the Czech Republic, which are near 100 or 100% dependent on Russian gas. One of the stories which has been very big this month has been the talk of having to pay in Russian rubles, and a lot of uncertainty as to what that would mean. It has turned out there's been some confusion about what the EU sanctions meant. And some people would argue it's still a little bit confused, but it's been taken that it is possible to pay and meet both Putin's decree and meet the terms of the EU sanctions to pay into a Gazprom bank account. And you can pay in euros or dollars, whatever your contract says, and then it can convert it into rubles in the rubles account. And that seems to be enough to keep both parties happy. However, some countries have said that they're not, before the Gazprom bank option came about, some countries already said they weren't going to pay. So Finland, I think the Netherlands are umming and ahhing. I heard today that Denmark aren't going to pay and they're likely to be cut off tomorrow. And Poland and Bulgaria refuse to comply. And so Gazprom has halted supplies to Finland, Poland and Bulgaria, and are likely to. They don't supply Denmark directly, so it would only be the proportion that would usually go to Denmark via, say, Nord Stream that will be removed. So a proportion of less Russian gas will be going in because that's not supposed to go on to Denmark. But you'll see later on in some of the other charts that this is quite a small amount of the total Russian gas that's supplied. So some countries have made some announcements. Germany, Italy and Austria have all announced their plans to be independent of Russian gas. And these are quite ambitious by 2024, 25 and 27 respectively. So we'll look at some of these volumes and we can have a think about how likely that is to be the case. And the EU's also recently announced its aim to reduce overall gas demand by 1/3 by 2030, which is again ambitious. I couldn't not have this one in again because it gives you a really good idea from back to the beginning of 2021. This goes, or how prices would normally look with TTF and MBP prices in the middle, and then the LNG JKM price is higher, and how these have moved. Now, it took a long time before any of the events that were happening were actually affecting US prices, but these started to be pulled up towards the end of last year and have now come up quite a lot. And you've got most recently, which is a big difference, obviously following the invasion of Ukraine, prices got high. But the price here has come down, JKM price, as globally things have got a little bit easier as the summer months coming on. But the TTF has not come down as much, and there's been an interesting separation of the MBP from away from the TTF. So we'll get on to why that might have happened in a couple of slides' time. Other developments have been the moves that all the countries around Europe, and Germany in particular, have made to diversify its choice of supplies. So Germany in particular has gone all out for LNG terminals. The Hanseatic Energy Hub Stade terminal has actually been underway for some time, and that's in a binding phase, open season phase already, but the proposed start is 2026, and that will come forward if they can manage it. And there's also a proposed terminal at Brunsbüttel and Wilhelmshaven, both of which have been proposed for a while, But the fastest moving are another couple of FSRUs that Uniper and RWE have secured and would like to have in place by the end of this year. So this is the fastest moving, and it's got funding from the German government. So it's kind of got FID, and there's an investment in it. So these are 4 terminals that are all underway coming into Germany. The Netherlands also has a planned expansion of the Gate terminal and 2 new FSRUs proposed for Eemshaven. And the Baltics have proposed new FSRUs in Estonia, possibly in Finland. They're trying to decide whether to put one in Estonia or one in Finland, and one in Latvia. So there's a lot going on up in the north of Europe. And down in the south, Italy has also been taking a number of steps. Italy's got a bit of a better picture because it's got more diverse pipeline options than Germany has. Even so, it's got 15 BCM of LNG capacity, and it's looking to procure 2 more FSRUs quickly, and on top of the one that with Golar LNG, which is going to be putting gas into Sardinia, which is an island, so it doesn't affect the mainland Italy. And then there are another couple of potential LNG terminals. It's also got these good pipeline options from North Africa. So it's already reached a deal with Algeria, and it's negotiating with Azerbaijan, and there are some other options in Africa, which could come via the same route. I guess there'd have to be some pipeline extensions. And there's the Trans-Adriatic Pipeline, or TAP, which comes across from Greece, which currently has a capacity of 10 BCM, but could double. There's even talk of a new pipeline with Spain, because Spain has enough extra regasification capacity to make it worthwhile. So that there are talks underway looking at that, and obviously boosting renewable energy, which the rest of Europe is doing as well, and taking down some of the barriers to investment. Another development that's been going on, and you saw it in the first price chart that I showed you, is Europe's 2 largest traded hubs are the MBP in the UK and TTF in the Netherlands, and they're normally very well correlated, and that is because we're very well connected between the 2 hubs. We have 2 large pipelines, and that is a sort of pipeline that could take up to 20 BCM of gas. That's just the one into Belgium. So there are some really large pipelines that connect us, and you also have the optionality of LNG ships, cargoes, under terms where they could deliver into whichever hub they wish. So they can pick into France, Belgium, the Netherlands, or into one of the UK terminals if they wish to, which adds a sort of arbitrage opportunity. And also there's this pipeline network of Norwegian gas. It's not completely flexible in that some fields are tied to come into the UK, but there are other fields which you might wish to send into a different market. You could send down a different pipeline. So there's a degree of flexibility in the Norwegian pipeline network, which would allow the 2 hubs to arbitrage and does normally keep them quite closely correlated. However, the prices between them, and this is last week, has been closing this price gap between them. So it's closed up a little bit more today. But there is still a gap between them, a considerable gap. And this is for various reasons for these different factors. So one of them is that some of the Norwegian infrastructure is down for maintenance in the summer. And it has been that the piece of infrastructure that was down for maintenance at one point at least was everything that was going into Germany. So it meant that they were getting less gas there, which is a bit critical because that's where the Russian gas is most needed. So that was one stage. At the moment, all those Northwest European hubs on the continent, terminals on the continent, are going at full capacity, trying to put as much gas into storage as possible. So there's a constraint there where there isn't a constraint in the UK. So LNG ships can still keep bringing it into the UK. And there has been, I'm not sure the status of it just at the moment, but there has been some restrictions on the IUK pipeline. It's been in such heavy use that some solid materials are built up in the pipeline. It's to do with the quality of the gas and the amount it's being used, which has restricted the flow slightly. And just to say that the amount of cargoes that are coming into GB has been very high. This is only up to the 13th of May, but many more cargoes have been coming in to the UK. So it has been acting as a bit of a hub for LNG to flow to the continent. So one of the things, that was the general market update and all the things that have been happening lately and since the last webinar. I wanted to look a little bit at what would happen if the Russians interrupted their supplies in the short term. And there are various reasons. I mean, there are many reasons the EU might wish to stop taking Russian gas, depending on what occurs in the war in Ukraine. However, there are also some reasons that could cause Gazprom to interrupt some or all of its exports to the EU. So the first of these that was most recently considered is this failure to pay in rubles. But I think it's fair to say that curtailments for this reason now seem unlikely, although having said that, I've just heard that Denmark and the Netherlands, they're still relatively small markets. I think from the really big dependent markets, this is fairly unlikely to happen for that reason. I think it's safe to say that anything could still happen regarding the transit across Ukraine. There have been some difficulties on one of the routes across Ukraine, so that the Ukraine transporter did halted flows via one route, and they were blaming it on the theft of gas by pro-Russian separatists, and they were able to transfer the gas that would have flowed that route via one of the other pipeline routes. That might change slightly where it crosses the border into Europe, but there is quite a lot of capacity across Ukraine, so they've got some options to transport it differently. However, because we're so uncertain as to what could happen in Ukraine, I'd say that further events to interrupt those flows seem highly possible. And the other thing that's happened in Germany is that Gazprom Germania, which was completely controlled by and owned by Gazprom, has now been taken over by the German government. So the Federal Network Agency had control of it since the beginning of April. And Gazprom Germania own Wingas, a major gas supplier, and Astoria, who operates some storage fields in Germany. And there's a large contract that goes Gazprom Wingas. Now it's being run, Wingas is now being effectively run by the German government. I'm not sure how the continuation of the supply and Gazprom supplying that contract will be. It's a large contract that's due to run to 2031. So we'll see how that turns out. It's a little bit hard to tell exactly what the politics are around when the company is being run by the German government. So this is a bit of analysis that we did, and it's a step further than we've done in previous webinars, where we looked at Europe as a whole and what might replace Russian gas as a whole to Europe. In that Germany being the market that is most dependent in absolute terms and volumes of Russian gas, to have a look at what would happen if Russian gas were completely interrupted into Germany. So on the left-hand side there, I've got the actual flows in and out of Germany in 2021, and this is from the ENSOG transparency platform. So it's all the pipelines that are going in and out, and Germany is quite a complicated market. So in fact, the Netherlands, gas goes in and gas goes out various pipelines at different places as it's transported around the two networks. So that is a net figure of what goes from the Netherlands to Germany and back again. A net figure is 18 BCM. I haven't put there's BCM here, but it's not on the scale there. So you can see a whole 76 BCM entered Germany via 55 of which will have come down Nord Stream, and the rest via Yamal. So that's quite a lot of Russian gas, plus the other sources of gas, and a lot of that gas transits Germany and goes out. A little bit of complication with the Czech Republic, and it goes out to the Czech Republic, uses their network, and then delivers back into the south of Germany. So that's why you've got check out and check in. That's gas that is transiting the Czech system. But that's a lot of gas that actually transiting, and then you've got the large German gas demand. So if you were to cut that off altogether, we ran the model to look where else Europe could get gas. Now this was before any of the before we'd added any of the new proposed LNG terminals into Germany. So this is just taking the additional LNG that's coming in via the Netherlands, Gate, and via Zeebrugge and Belgium. So you can see that from the left to the right, the flows from the Netherlands, now it's only one way, there's no back, it's just going into the Netherlands. There's a 24 BCM coming in from the Netherlands. So there's an increase that will probably be from LNG, could be from Groningen, could be from Norwegian gas, but also primarily LNG, because the Norwegian has a direct route into Germany. So you can see that in this situation, a lot more Norwegian gas is delivered into Germany, and then a lot more gas comes in via Belgium, and that would be coming via Zeebrugge. So that's how the LNG is getting into Germany before they build their new LNG terminals. And then now, it's not really part of the model exactly, but what I did here was I prorated the lost load of what German demand would be, and German demand is slightly lower due to other switching away from gas. So there's a bit of saving of gas demand, if you like. So in this scenario, we've got lower gas demand, then we've got some lost load in Germany, and then there are fewer transit gas. There's less gas transiting. And what I've done is I've taken the net transit gas and the size of the demand, and then taken out the effect of the Russian gas, and I've just prorated it. And that's what the answer is if you just prorate it. That's not necessarily how it would be done. It's possible that more gas would stay in Germany, and you'd have less lost load in Germany, and less gas would transit Germany, which means you'd have more lost load further down the European system. And that is the question that I've tried to have a look at next, is how you would actually manage that. But before I go on to how you might manage that and as interruption, we have run our Q2 scenario, where we've actually got those imports of LNG, additional imports of LNG through those terminals I mentioned earlier. And in the gas year, which starts in October each year, so that's from October 22 for 12 months, we actually have 7.5 BCM of LNG just entering Germany directly. And then by the gas year 2025, you've got 45 BCM. Now, you can see from the numbers above, if you were able to maintain the amount of LNG that was coming in by the Netherlands and Belgium as well, which is quite a big ask because you're asking quite a lot more LNG, you can start to cover the lost load in Germany, but it's whether you then send on any of that gas on to transit to the other countries in Central Europe would be another question as to how the gas is going to be bought in Europe. I mean, and there have been announcements of a joint purchasing mechanism. So presumably if you have a joint purchasing mechanism and it comes in via the German terminals, then it will go on to some of these other countries. So this is my look at how the energy solidarity might work were there to be an interruption. And I had a look. The Security of Supply Directive states that there are such things as protected customers in each member state. And in this case, I've assumed that they would be the residential, commercial and public services. So I've taken those numbers from the IEA for 2019, looked at the total size demand in BCM of these customers and put those down next to that annual demand. So you get a feel for what the protected customer size segment of a particular market would look like. The actual rules in that directive are something such as if a country, it looks like it may have to interrupt its protected customer segment, they can ask the neighbouring country that would normally supply them to transit more gas as long as it doesn't threaten the protected customers in that previous upstream market, if you like. So it's a little bit complicated because the market that's hardest hit in this scenario is Slovakia. And Slovakia would normally import a great deal of gas from Ukraine and also a lot of gas from the Czech Republic via Nord Stream and then gas via Ukraine. So assuming that Ukraine's completely cut off, then Germany and the Czech Republic and Germany are the upstream countries that would need to be supplying Slovakia. And as you can see, what I've done here is I've just prorated it, so with the demand versus what the transit gas was before, and prorated the amount of interruption. So you're losing about a third of German gas. You've got unmet demand for about a third of the German demand, and you've got unmet demand for about a quarter of the Czech Republic demand, and then you've got, actually it goes down to about half, and you are getting quite close to the protected customer estimate. And if you were thinking that a lot of those will be residential, and if it's going to be winter, then you probably are actually into cutting off protected customers in this scenario in a winter month. And then I've also got just further downstream going on to Austria and onto other markets. Now, this isn't necessarily how it would happen. There might be some central organisation. One would hope it'd be centrally organised and there'd be a state of emergency, and that there'd be some knowledge of which markets needed the gas and some rules about how you were moving it around. So it's really where this extra gas that comes in would be dispersed around Europe. And then going downstream from Austria, we've also had a look, and our Italian office has had a look. It's not, it's a slightly different situation because it's not got all the transit gas that you have in Germany. So you don't have the same amount of questions as to what would stay in the country and what would transit the country, which is a big question for Germany. But Italy has a lot more sources in. It has North Africa, it's got some LNG. This gas from Austria is that gas that would have come down via Nord Stream and is Russian gas, or Ukraine, or across the Ukraine. So this gas via Austria is Russian gas, so that's nearly the 30 BCM there. And there's a little bit that comes across Switzerland, and TAP, which is that Trans-Adriatic pipeline, which could bring gas from Azerbaijan. And so that's how. So it just only has a small amount of export, Italy. So there's not large amounts of transit gas. So if you were to cut off the Russian gas, then you lose this Austrian. You lose this chunk of nearly 30 BCM of Russian gas. Okay, more gas does come down from Northwest Europe, and it could come via Switzerland or via Austria. And that would be Norwegian gas and some LNG from France and Belgium that could come down and meet some of the demand. So that the estimate of the amount that could come that route is about 8. Obviously, the LNG terms I mentioned earlier, they've got a capacity of about 15. So Italy would start using nearly all that capacity as well. The Italians have already done a deal to take more gas from Algeria at short notice. So that can go up by 3 BCM. So if you add up this way, then you end up, I haven't changed demand in this scenario, haven't done the analysis to look at how much lower you might be able to, if you switched away from gas generation or anything else. And so the demand's the same in both cases here. Then you've got a loss load of about 10 BCM to Italy in the case of a Russian interruption. And then looking at what was actually happening in our central scenario a bit later, actually the imports from North Africa can increase by 9 altogether. So you actually get up, well, it's 10 here because it was 25 the maximum. So you can get up to 34 in 2023. So you can get a lot more from North Africa. TAP capacity could double. And as long as you can get enough more gas along from Azerbaijan and Turkey, then that could go up. And you're going to have more LNG capacity in 2027, probably another 10. So you can see filling that gap of 10, once all these things have happened, becomes quite manageable, quite doable for Italy. So I've touched upon our Q2 projections when I was looking at the interruptions. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail as to how they look overall. So the basis of our central scenario is that no Russian gas contracts into Europe will be renewed, and that many new LNG regas terminals will be built. So this chart shows you the annual contracted quantities of Russian contracts into Europe. Okay, and this is the total annual quantity. And on the right, we actually are assuming in our central scenario that the minimum contract quantities are taken, which is the take or pay volume, which is about 80%. So you drop down from this amount to this, but you drop it to 80%. And this is a good place to point out the size of the Bulgarian here and the Polish contracts, both of which were ending this year. In any case, it's their last year. So Gazprom hasn't done themselves a great deal of harm by cutting them off. They haven't lost compared to the other volumes. They've given the market a bit of a shock and put the price up briefly by making everybody worry that they would interrupt. But in terms of actually cutting off any of their sales volumes, it's very little. And then that's Finland here, this pale green. So again, by cutting off Finland, they're losing very little. And I haven't looked at this today. Denmark going on small, but goes on for a lot longer. They're cutting off Denmark. And the Netherlands small. You see all these markets that are happy to cut off or are happy to not, to be cut off are actually very small. So it's really Germany and Italy and some of these other markets that are much more significant in terms of absolute volumes and revenues for Gazprom.
Lucy,
so that's
I was just going to jump in on that point, and I think we can talk. We're going to talk a little bit later about comparison with the Repower EU plans and what they say, because this is likely to be a contentious point. I think our view that the gas contracts carry on and aren't renewed rather than are shut down, significantly before 2030, for instance. So just to say that's something we'll be talking about a bit later on, in case it's on anyone's mind at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. So this is our central view, and that means that we stop using Russian gas in 2038. So some of you will be thinking, really? That isn't what any of the politicians are saying. So we'll move on to that after I had a bit more talking about our projections. So this is the picture as it's been, and we've got an estimated value in there for 21, because I don't like to mix up sources because you get all sorts of inconsistencies. So when BP, ND Statistics put out theirs, then I'll complete the other numbers. But that's what's been going on, and this I've included Turkey in these numbers, so you can see the volumes that are coming from the Middle East. That's Iran, and Central Asia, that's Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan, and they come into Turkey. And then you can see North Africa, which is coming into Spain and Italy. And then this is our projection for next calendar year, which is quite interesting. So by next calendar year, we've really brought the Russian gas down to a minimum level. That 80% of the contract value, so we're down to just around the 80 BCM mark, which was in previous calculations I've done the minimum amount you have to import from Russia to avoid interruption. So we get that down to that by next year, and we do that by having more gas from North Africa, a lot more LNG, and there's a bit more pipeline gas coming from Russia into Turkey, some of which may make its way into the EU. And then that's the LNG, that was Norwegian pipeline I pointed out before, 125, that's Norwegian sort of output maximising there, it's reaching its peak, that's about as high as it's going to be able to go. So, and it's the LNG here that we've added on. Unfortunately, our indigenous reserves they're not really going up a lot. So this is where you start to see that I've gone out now to 25, 30, 35 and 40. I've gone all the way out to 2040. And again, some of you might be worrying a bit about the fact in the long term we're still using a great deal of gas, but by this stage in our modelling, some of it has carbon capture and storage attached to it, power generation CCS, and also some of it's being used to produce blue hydrogen. Although that does depend on the price coming down to be competitive again. And you can see the Norwegian production starts to decline at this point. LNG reaches a sort of peak at the end of the 30s, and then just generally gas demand is declining through the 30s. And that's when we expect all the other renewables technologies, everything to start really taking off, and hydrogen, green hydrogen start taking off, so that gas demand is really able to fall, although some of it is being used. and the carbon's been captured. So despite the fact that we have continued to use some Russian gas, and this is in dark green here, and these include Turkey, so the contracts in Turkey are expected to be renewed, so that we've still got some Russian gas in 2040 here. This is our Q1 projection of suppliers into Europe and know where they come from, and this is after the invasion of Ukraine. So this illustrates that following the invasion of Ukraine, our projections have changed significantly. Gas demand is coming down quicker, less blue hydrogen, lower gas demand, tighter decarbonisation targets, and we're coming down quicker. Did you want to talk about some of the money? Shall I leave Matt to talk about the money?
Yeah, no. I was gonna raise a couple of points really, and one is this question of if we stop taking Russian gas 2027 or before 2030. Some of the questions that have been raised is what happens to the Russian gas? Where does it go? Does it find a market? So maybe just to touch upon that one. And of course, when we've also, just to say, when we've got some figures here, 420 billion euros, etc., very much dependent on where gas prices are going, as you can see on the chart on the right, as to what happens to the value of the gas exports that Russia has. So coming to what happens to the gas, I've seen in the past some commentators say that Russia will fill up storage for several months, that they can do that. But I think you need to think about the counterfactual. Russian gas demand is highly seasonal, it's quite large, and I'm pretty sure they need the storage to be able to manage that seasonality. They have some flexibility in production in the swing in the fields as well, but still they need to use that storage because in any case to fill it up to be ready for the next season. So where else could the gas go? And we've talked a little bit about new LNG export facilities out of Russia, or indeed gas pipeline down to China. And I think, Lucy, where do we transit? Is it Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, is it? I can't quite remember.
Put me on the spot, I can't remember my geography very well. It's quite a long way, and it's via some territories which would probably would like paying for their transit, and have their own pipeline systems as well.
So we have Para-Siberia 1, which is taking gas, but it's not taking the gas that is being produced for Europe. It's in a different part of the country. Para-Siberia 2, as I understand, would be connecting up to the fields that are producing gas that's sent to Europe. But of course, that's going to take some time to build out. So we're talking about this sort of closing window of opportunity for Gazprom and for Russia in terms of their gas exports. And if Europe does move quickly to stop all gas imports, then I think there aren't, in the short term, a lot of options for Russia. And in fact, we'd need to look in detail in the upstream about what happens if you have to shut in the fields, what impact that has overall in reserves and future production as well. So I think there's quite a lot of unanswered questions on that front. The other thing to say is here with the gas import value, of course, Russia also supplies and exports a lot of crude oil and oil products. And actually the value of the crude oil and oil products that it exports is considerably higher than the value of the gas exports. So obviously there's a big amounts of money we're talking about here, but actually they're slightly dwarfed by the oil and oil products. Although one of my colleagues was saying that the price at which the Russian gas is trading is quite a discount currently to Brent and WTI. So there we sort of have, as Lucy said, the difference in our current scenario, our central view. Of course, we're happy to run other scenarios, and with the global gas model and the detailed modelling it does country to country. That's why Lucy's been doing some of this analysis for some of our clients who are interested in Germany or interest in Italy, and so on. So very happy if people want to look at alternative scenarios of what could happen and what impact that could have on gas prices as well if we were to shut off Russian gas straight away. Look at the next slide, Lucy.
Okay, I was going to add to this one. I don't know whether it was clear from what Matt was saying that we're looking at here the amount that is lost in terms of revenue to Gazprom in gas between our two scenarios. And then the dashed line is the EU has said they will wish to end all Russian imports by the end of 2027. So the dashed line is a sort of total loss of revenues were that to occur, on top of the difference that we have in ours, and sort of another 160 billion euros if the EU got its way and ended the Russian gas a bit earlier. And we're going to just go on a bit more about those EU stated aims, actually, including that one to get rid of gas, Russian gas, they've said in 2027, which I took to mean the end of 2027. So I had a look at the contracts and all the volumes of the minimum volumes, take or pay levels of all the contracts that exist in 2027. And I got rid of the Gazprom Gasim contract because they weren't paying rubles. I could now get rid of the Denmark contract and potentially get rid of, there's one with the Netherlands in there. I thought there was one on the other chart. Anyway, I have taken out the Gazprom Wingas contract, so that's made the German contract remaining much smaller there, but left quite a lot going into Italy. So you could have as much as 50 BCM of contracted gas, which if the EC's plan to end all Russian gas imports came about, they'd need to pass a law in the European Parliament so that the contracts could be declared illegal. And then the contract parties could call force majeure on those contracts. I think most contracts would probably have a clause in them that you could call force majeure if the contract was declared illegal. And then but Gazprom could still take them to arbitration. So I imagine it's quite every contract, all these contracts are slightly different terms. So there's been plenty of work for lawyers to discuss the terms of the force majeure. So I had a look at the same time, I said in 2028, so after the end of 27, what it would look like, what our AFRY scenario looks like, where we still have nearly 70 BCM of Russian gas at that time, and we haven't seen gas demand in Europe fall as quickly. And then there's a reduction in demand. The absolute demand here, the 520 there, includes the EU, Switzerland, the UK and Turkey, so it's above just the EU. But were the EU to fall in line, aiming for that third reduction by 2030, then you would come down to more like 480 BCM across these countries, and you'd have no Russian gas at all. And then that Russian gas, that remaining 70 that we have in our central currently, it's quite debatable as to whether we keep it in there, as you know, we'll be watching how things progress in Europe. At the moment, we have imagine about 70. So the European Commission is suggesting that they'd be able to find another 25 LNG on the global market, get more gas from North Africa, get more gas from Azerbaijan, principally, and then they'd be able to get this demand reduction of an extra 34 BCM by 2028 in place. And this is our Repower EU, which had various announcements very recently about ambitious targets to grow the renewables, improve energy efficiency, and bring down demand for gas. I'll let Matt talk a little bit about Repower EU, some of the plans they have.
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it there. It's on the slide. I think the most challenging part here is the cut in gas demand and you know, getting out of Russian gas by 2027, end of 2027 or in 2027, and that's obviously the one of the bigger areas of difference in what we currently have. and the stated aims of the EU. The other big question, of course, is around renewables and fast tracking of licensing and consents, because historically renewable projects have been, in many countries, have been held up because of planning and licensing issues. So if it was possible to put something in place that projects of overriding public interest were getting fast tracked, and maybe some of the not dealt with at such a local level, that can have a really big impact. Because there are massive pipelines of renewables, of solar and wind ready to go and could be deployed pretty quickly. All of this has to be agreed, of course, and then especially for the gas contracts, put into law, as Lucy said, so that they could be called force majeure. I think that was our last slide. We've got quite a lot of questions.
Well, we have one last one, which is summarise everything we've said.
Sorry.
But we can, that's fine. There's one last slide. The only thing I'd point you to is Matt touched upon what might be happening with where will all the Russian gas go. And my colleague Helg has put something on LinkedIn just talking about that. You can see a map of that, of the pipeline to China, and a little bit more information about that, which you might want to have a look at. Everything else we've seen here. Do you want to go through the questions, Matt?
Yeah, let's have a quick canter through the questions. If I can just open the pane again. So I think we've covered some elements here. So there's a question here from someone saying, any predictions how much the gas demand of residential customers might reduce significantly higher prices? And at the moment, I would say we probably don't have a good estimate. The other point that I would make is that in a number of countries, of course, measures are being put in place, so the full impact of those price rises isn't seen by customers. I personally would have expected a little bit more of a Japanese Fukushima scenario already, that there would be a regardless of price impact, that there would be a campaign of suggesting people could have been turning down their thermostats, education on what could be done, and of course on the energy efficiency front, that's in the repower. Bit of a missed opportunity in lots of places where we could have done a lot more in the past. So yeah, how much the price impact would be is difficult to tell overall at this stage, I think, given some of the uncertainties. Anything to add, Lucy, on that one?
Not, I don't think so. I can't see us predicting that exactly. It's a hard one. Like you say, the impact of the price changes is not being fully felt.
Yeah. And yeah, the next question here, given the significant amount of rerouting of gas shown in the calculation here, is it confirmed that all pipelines involved can actually be reversed in flow direction?
Yeah, the capacities in the model, everything in those charts that I showed for Germany, and all those three charts I showed are in the model, and we have the capacities in both directions. So yes, they can't flow more. They can flow up to the capacities we've shown. I'm trying to think if there's any exceptions going forward, whether they're made. That I think beyond from 23 onwards, I would say there are probably some. We probably assume some increases to get the new LNG into Germany. So there are some pipelines to get that LNG into the German network. That there are pipelines that have to be built, and I would say that some of the transport around the German network as well. There are probably bottlenecks within the German network. So that's where I would have a question mark over that, because it's got a lot of demand, Germany, in different areas, and there's quite a split between the sides of Germany. So there might be some constraints there.
And in terms of technical detail, maybe we'll come back, but I'm just wondering, some of those constraints could be alleviated by investment in the gas network, and probably fairly short-term investment extra compressors, etc.?
It's extra compressors normally rather than pipelines, just to change the direction. And compressors can usually suck a bit, so you can usually do something with getting it to flow the other way, but to get full capacity, you have to get a new one on the other end. So yes, there might be something around there, but the modelling is done with the capacities of the as it stands at the moment for the 2022 interruption. It's just going forward. We probably put in some upgrades as the LNG comes in.
Lucy, what is your opinion on the European Commission plan to centralise the purchase of gas for the EU countries?
Well, it'd be interesting to see what they say to each other around the table, won't it? Germany's investing in these LNG terminals, and it's how much they want to secure the German market versus how much they want to secure the whole of the European market. But I think the EU-US relationship is a large part of what's going to bring that US LNG into Europe. So it'll be very hard for Germany to keep it all, because the agreement's going to be between the EU and the US to bring that LNG into Europe. And if it's coming in naturally, if those LNG terminals are in Germany and if the pipelines connecting them to the German network are in place, then it will be the natural place for it to land, because it's where most of the demand is. And they've got these connections going on to the Czech Republic and Slovakia where they're going to really need it. So yeah, it's going to be, they'll have to come to some arrangements as to how they share it out. But the demands in Slovakia and the Czech Republic are so much smaller than Germany. I think that will probably work out that they will share it. And Italy is quite differently connected. So they're the two biggest markets. France is more in the middle, but France has got quite a lot of LNG capacity of its own already. How much hydrogen?
I'm asking the questions. How much green hydrogen would Europe need to do? No. What do you think? What's your answer? I can give you my answer if you like. And that's, so this is how much green hydrogen would Europe need to produce to completely displace natural gas imports?
You might know more about this than me. My understanding is that you just can't produce enough green hydrogen to get anywhere close to replacing the gas. It just, you can't do enough of it. You'd have the whole country, every bit of generation we have would have to be producing hydrogen. Hydrogen isn't as calorific. It's just not gonna supply the energy that's required, you know, in volume density, the energy density per volume, and just the producing of it. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I think we saw some stats just to put it in context. Obviously, the heat demand in Europe is quite large. You know, there's a lot of natural gas being used to supply heat. Even to replace the grey hydrogen, you know, and that's just the hydrogen that's currently being used in industry. It's a vast amount of renewables that would be needed to replace the grey hydrogen and make it green. I think the estimates are, you know, the renewable capacity of Germany over again just to replace the green. I think if floating offshore can be deployed successfully, then perhaps there is a longer term option, but still it's vast quantities in scale to replace all of that natural gas with green hydrogen. I think we've covered to a certain extent the gas fields. That is, it's slightly opaque and it's not so easy to know what the state of in terms of the maintenance and so on that's been done and operational flexibility, what that looks like from outside of Russia. Do we have any data, Lucy, on the gas storages in
I don't know what Russia's going to publish. I think in the past you've been able to pick it up because they have published some of the status of their gas storage. But I don't know whether they will publish that now, whether that'll be confidential. I think it's inevitable that they suffer some difficulties with their fields and maintenance, because these are quite old fields, some of these mega fields that are around Moscow and supply that area. And if they can't flow down in the routes they've always flowed and it's interrupted, then that is going to cause them some maintenance difficulties. And the fields, some gas may never be produced. It may be there's a turning point. If Europe turns off and they haven't got anywhere else to send it ready to go, they can try and send some of it to LNG, but it's not going to be the same volumes. So there are going to be difficulties. I haven't looked a lot at the Russian side of the picture, to be fair.
Yeah. Good. Next question, how come Turkey drops from 34 BCM in 2023 to 26 BCM in 2025?
I can't remember off the top of my head. There are different sources of gas and demand is different. So it might be that as European demand goes down, less gas is flowing from Turkey into the EU. I can't answer on the top of my head.
Where was that shown, Lucy? Was there a? I'm just wondering if it was it representing total gas from Turkey at some point in a projection? In one of
I'm not sure. I can't tell. I couldn't tell you exactly what's happening unless I could see all the different sources. So Turkey supplied by LNG and Iran and Azerbaijan, as well as Russia. So any one of those sources could be cheaper than the Russian supplies in that year, which has reduced the amount. I suspect it's to do with less Russian gas being needed going through Turkey into the EU by 25, because we've become more independent of it.
Okay, understood. I'm not sure this sort of answers itself. The next question, in terms of getting EU agreement to phase out Russian gas supplies, what lessons can you draw from the process of getting agreement to phase out Russian oil, which obviously hasn't been going terribly well. So if the lessons were to be drawn, if you could read across, then perhaps it would be difficult to get agreement. And then the final one that I can see here, hi Lucy, in the chart showing potential loss to Gazprom revenues, you show multiple curves at different price levels. In a world where Europe would be constraining gas supply and trying to divest from Russia, wouldn't gas prices at higher values than 20, 30 or 40 euro megawatt hour? Instinctively, that seems too low. So
thank you for that, Philip. You're supposed to be on my side. But I would say that the thing is about the prices is that in the shorter term, there's loads of geopolitical risk associated with gas. So that, you know, prices have gone very high. So our feeling is that it will remain very high. But the fact is everybody is turning away from gas and turning away from Russian gas as fast as they can. And demand is being hit by that. And there is some demand destruction. Okay, and definitely a dislike for, and across globally, that's the case as well. India's stopped buying gas because it's too expensive for them, and China's changed its plan to use coal and CCS rather than gas and CCS as part of its decarbonisation. So the fact is that demand is going to be falling, and prices should, if demand is falling, should rebalance as the world and Europe adjusts to Russian gas as being unattractive. That's what I would say. So yes, they seem moderate, but I was trying to take into account the fact that demand is falling fast as well.
The other question for me is, what's the marginal source of gas in the longer term, and is it of a different price than the next marginal source of gas? You know, if we're bringing LNG and building LNG facilities, and you can do that at 30 or 40 euros a megawatt hour.
Yeah.
You know, is that not a reasonable price?
Yeah, it's principally US, isn't it, that's expanding to fill the gap, and so we should perhaps be looking at the fact that US prices are now being pulled up with a little bit of concern, because it's obviously beginning to impact the global situation, beginning to impact the US market in a way that it hadn't done before.
And then finally, we had a few other questions. Yeah. I was just going to go to those.
We've only got a minute to cover the other ones.
Really? Oh, okay. Well, maybe we'll get back to people via email or some other medium to do that. Some of the other questions that have come in advance, and cover those off as well. So probably it's better that we follow up individually with some of those questions. I'm sure we can do that. Which only leaves me to say thank you all for listening and sticking with us, and thank you very much, Lucy, for another insightful webinar. Well done.
Thank you very much. Okay.
and we'll see you all next time. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.